right, so obviously he talked a little bit about the Senate bill. So this is, with education, we kind of have a war of the two bills here between the two houses, right? Where the House of Representatives has put forth House Bill 2, and they've already, started the ball moving on that, and the Senate did the same thing. Literally the second day, first day of the session, the Senate was rocking and rolling, and they were ready to go with these bills. So let's talk a little bit about Senate Bill 2001, which is the Senate's version of House Bill 1 of school choice. Now, the difference is there's no vouchers here. There is no money involved. Essentially, what the Senate has done is they said, they've opened up the gateway. Last year they said students can transfer public to public school districts if they want to. Now they have said, let's make that a little easier. However, we're not paying for it. We're not, paying for transportation. We're not paying, for you to go private, but we will make it easier for your student to transfer from one school district, a public school district, to another public school district. So that is what Senate Bill 2001 does. It basically says, 2002, talking about 2002. 2002 basically says that the current school that the student is at can no longer deny that student the privilege of transferring to another school district, because I'm sure, as you know, every time you lose a student at a school district, you lose funding. So it's funding based off of the student. So previously, schools could say, no, we're not going to send you, we don't want you to go, you're going to stay here. This bill says that they cannot do that so long as the receiving school district is okay with it, and they've signed off on it, and they agree that they're willing to receive another child into their school. So that's what this does is, it's school choice, there's no money involved, it's a public-to-public transfer, and it's still putting the responsibility of finances and transportation on the family of the child. And those school districts cannot deny the student from transferring so long as the transfer school says they are okay with it. They've signed off on that and they're ready to receive it. We'll go back to Senate Bill 2001. This is pay raises. So pay raises, the teacher shortage, and school transfers are all three separate bills here. They've done that, and they've done that intentionally, and we're going to get into why they've done that intentionally. So Senate Bill 2001 is going to give school teachers, assistants, and college faculty a raise, and it's going to raise those current salaries by $2,000. Now, there was some confusion about why are college professors included. And one of the reasons that I saw was to avoid college professors from leaving working at a higher education institution and going to work at a high school, because there's a teacher shortage all around, not just elementary, middle school, high school, it's everywhere. So that was the goal there. So that would give everyone across the board a $2,000 raise. And then 2003, that is our Senate Bill 2003, that is geared towards the teacher shortage. So all this has mostly done, it's what it's focused on, is making it so that retired teachers who have pulled out their benefits from the public retirement system can go back to teach easier. And the reason that we're doing that now, or the Senate's reason for doing that, is because there's just too much of a teacher shortage to not let retired teachers go back to teach if they want to. So that would be the goal here. So the retiree teacher, they're not paid at 100% of what they would normally receive if they never retired to begin with. However, they're still pulling their retirement, so you have to keep that in mind. So this would increase the retirees' salary from 50% of what their normal salary would be had they not retired up to 65%. So they're going to get paid 65% of that original salary that they were making as when they come back from retirement. They will now be able to return to work after only 45 days instead of the original 90. And they will be able to have a temporary teaching certificate if they've been out of the career path for a long time and they need to, recertify, then they'll be able to have that temporary one while they're working. So I'm going to read a little bit of a quote here from Delbert Hoseman. He said, "These bills are the direct result of education committee hearings and extensive conversations with the Department of Education, educators across Mississippi, and PERS leadership. The $2,000 teacher pay raise is a starting point, and we are hopeful it can increase as the budgetary process continues." So that is their goal. Their goal is that this is the same way with House Bill 1, is going to bounce back and forth and go between the House and the Senate, and that within that, they will come to a conclusion of a set amount that is hopefully above the $2,000. So we will, keep following that and see what's going on. Now, I did talk to, once again, I talked to Senator Barnett about what he thinks of the Senate having, created all of these different bills, and he's going to really speak to the fact of why are they all three separate instead of one just big bill similar to House Bill 2.
I don't think that we should put everything together, and if it doesn't make it, then it all dies together as well. This directly impacts the classroom because no school is graded on what happens at the at the administrative part. They're graded based on what these kids are taught in the classroom, and it's these teachers that are pouring out all they can into our students, and they're the ones that need to be compensated for their hard work.
All right, so that was kind of their thinking behind it, was that they don't want, by putting all of their eggs in one basket, are they losing everything? So even if the school choice doesn't pass, then hopefully they can still pass the teacher pay raises. And from what I'm understanding, teacher pay raises all around are a priority from the Senate to the House, from Republican to Democrat, from independent, it doesn't matter. They all want to get some kind of teacher pay raise if they can. So we're going to try and wrap up here as quick as we can. So we're going to talk just a little bit about what PERS is. So they did do a huge PERS funding bill, and this also happened in that first week, where this was a Senate Bill 2004. This basically says that they're going to transfer $500 million from the capital expense fund to employer accumulation accounts, and that also would put $50 million in every year for the next 10 years until 2036. Now, what happens if there was not $50 million in the capital expense fund? Well, this says you're going to have to find it somewhere. It says you're going to have to pull it from the general fund, and basically says that no matter what, there needs to be that additional $50 million added every year. So what is, kind of bopping around, some conversation is happening, and this is stuff that's coming out of the committee. That is a lot of stuff about graduation, about literacy rates, huge focus on education this year, and they're really starting strong with education. So they're saying they don't, these are all kind of the mixture between House and Senate. I saw a lot of no cell phone bills, and this would make it so that students couldn't have a cell phone between bell to bell. And a lot of the ones I read did say explicitly that in the case of an emergency, a student would have their phone on them, they could access that. However, students would no longer be able to take out their phone at lunchtime, they're not going to take out their phone on their breaks, they're not taking out their phone in their classroom. It's a strict, when the morning bell rings, you put your phone up. When the morning bell, or when the evening bell, lets you out, you can take it back out, but you can't have it in between. So that is one of them. They want civic courses for graduation, and they especially want to see literacy improve between the grades of 4 to 8, and there was also a really big focus on dyslexia this year. So what else is going on? Of course, I do want to touch really quickly on House Bill 828. And this, I want to say, has not made it out of committee yet. This is still in a committee. A lot of things die in committee. Out of the over 2,000 bills, that were, put in, they essentially, turn these bills in as a possibility. Only like 500 pass average. So this is still in committee. It is House Bill 828, and this is the dog hunting bill. And this has been really popular. I've seen it all over social media. So let's talk about what the dog bill is. So essentially, this bill, its goal was to eliminate the destruction of public property that was coming with hunting nuisance animals and using dogs as associated with that. So, however, it has this little clause that everybody's kind of worried about. And it essentially says that you would only be allowed to dog hunt, use your dogs for hunting on private property that is more than 2,000 acres. So you have to own that property, and it has to be more than 2,000 acres. And like I said, it's intended to avoid the destruction of public lands. Now, while I was up there, this does not mean that there's not somebody up there who does agree with this, but I have yet to meet someone who does. Most everybody was not very fond of this bill, and it's a lot of them say it seems like it started out intended well, but it didn't quite work out that way. It came from a legislator in DeSoto County. I'm going to let Representative Donnie Scoggin talk a little bit about what he thinks about this bill and whether or not he's going to vote on this bill.
That if it should come out of committee, which I do not believe it will, then it will not pass the House. There's enough people that are against that bill that have dog hunting in their environment. It requires you to have private land up to 2,000 acres, and that just doesn't happen in South Mississippi. There's very few people that have 2,000 acres of continuous land that they could do that on, and so it's just a bad bill overall.
All right, so you heard it from him, folks. I'll continue to watch it, and we'll see what happens. If it does make it out of committee, I'll be sure to let you all know. I know we've got lots of hunters eager to know what is going on. So that is really all I've got for you. Of course, there's some other things that are kind of, in the works, but not necessarily as far along as some of these bills that I've previously mentioned outside of the dog bill. So that there's some questions about lottery funds and MDOT money, and we're going to talk about that next week. So the goal is to be able to get you guys the information you need from the last week, and under 30 minutes if we can. Some weeks hopefully under 15, and get it. Make sure you guys are staying super educated on what's happening up in the Capitol, especially with the people you voted for. What are they doing? And of course, we'll be following what bills they have wrote as they enter the House or the Senate. So we'll see you next time right back here. It's going to be around 11 o'clock. Thanks, guys.